Hey there, folks. Welcome to another edition of Stranger in a Southern Land. I, of course, am your host, Jake Manning. Today on the program, I speak with Nicole Odom. Nicole from Dogtopia here in Charlotte. This is one of the interviews that Candace from Robot Johnson lined me up with, and Candace was also lining me up with Austin Kane, which is one of my favorite episodes. Austin shared a fantastic story on that episode. So Candace has never led me wrong when it comes to guests, and Nicole is no different. Turns out me and Nicole had very parallel lives with each other. Like, I don't think people know this about me, but there was a time where I was thinking about getting into the armed services. Well, Nicole actually got in about the same time that I was thinking about going in. And Nicole wanted to basically be Maverick from Top Gun. She was inspired. She kind of ended up being Goose, but she did serve her country during the Iraq War for the Navy, and she was on an aircraft carrier, and she, did her job for this country, and her service is very much appreciated. And then when she got out of the Navy, she worked in the Defense Department, but then all of a sudden Katrina happened, and she felt compelled to volunteer her time. And when she was down there, she helped a lot of stray dogs and lost dogs, and that's what she did as volunteer work. And then that's when she decided that, hey, I want to take care of dogs for a living. This is what I want to do. I feel compelled to do this. And she just changed her whole life. And now she ended up here in Charlotte, North Carolina with Dogtopia, and that's what she's doing right now. I know I just said her life story here in a few minutes, but it did not take a few minutes, most certainly, to get to that point. It actually took a very long time and is a very arduous road, which we cover. Like I said, great conversation, great story, and Candace never steers me wrong when she gives me an interview guest to talk to, because Nicole was fascinating and her life story is just remarkable, and I hope you all benefit from listening to it. So, especially perseverance-wise, she went through a lot just to get her business here in Charlotte, Dogtopia. Anyways, I'm very thankful to be a part of the Shining Wizards Podcast Network. Thank you very much, guys, for making this cool kid stable a little bit larger. Hopefully some of you are listening to Shining Wizards and all the wonderful and great podcasts that they have on their network. And for more information about those podcasts, please check them out at shiningwizardsnetwork.com. Also, too, thank you to Don, my producer, and all the podcasts that he produces at dsct.tv. Also, I have another podcast with Don on dsct.tv, and that's How Did This Get Booked, that I do with Zane Riley, where we look at less than stellar professional wrestling, and we discuss it with a non-wrestling fan. So make sure you check that out as well. And more information about that is at howdidthisgetbooked.com. Anyways, for information about shows, I've got a lot of them coming up. I just want to feed them to you right now. Like I said, I'm just trying to get you guys to come out to local art, local comedy, local wrestling. And if none of these dates jive with you, well, there's plenty of it out there. You can go find it. But if you're interested in what I'm doing and see me do my thing, these are my dates, and I'm very much all over the board, especially in this upcoming month. Anyways, if you're listening to this podcast in a very timely fashion, tomorrow, May the 10th, I'll be performing at the Laughing Skull Lounge in Atlanta. Atlanta, Georgia has one of the best stand-up comedy scenes in the country. It's very growing. There's a lot of guys getting a lot of work and a lot of opportunity to get better. And I'm very happy and very fortunate that I will be performing at the Laughing Skull Lounge this Tuesday, May the 10th. So make sure you come out and support me there. Also, this Friday the 13th, which I did not realize when I took this booking, but I've taken many wrestling bookings on Friday the 13th. So hopefully nothing spooky happens, but it's professional wrestling. Something unique will definitely happen, especially this Friday, May the 13th, for Big Time Wrestling in Fairmount, West Virginia, which is around the Pittsburgh area. I know it's in West Virginia, but it's actually very close to Pittsburgh. So if anybody in the sound of my voice is in Pittsburgh and you want to see quality professional wrestling, and Big Time Wrestling always presents quality professional wrestling, they will be coming to Fairmount, West Virginia this Friday, May the 13th. And then May the 14th, Big Time Wrestling goes all the way back down to Lincolnton, North Carolina with Sting. This is the one I was telling you guys about. This is the one where the tickets are selling out like crazy. So make sure you get your tickets today at btwpro.com when Big Time Wrestling comes to Lincolnton, North Carolina, Saturday, May the 14th. Now, Saturday, May the 21st, Queens of Combat. Double feature. Got an afternoon show and a night show. For more information about those two shows, make sure you log on to combatqueens.com. Now, Monday, May the 23rd, I'll be performing comedy at the Beer and Comedy Night at the Sweetwater Brewery in Atlanta, Georgia. That's right, I'm going back down to do comedy in Atlanta. Like I said, I gotta be getting down there. If I want the stand-up comedy thing to happen, I gotta go where it's happening. And Atlanta, Georgia is definitely where it's happening. And on Monday, May the 23rd, is definitely where comedy will be happening at Sweetwater Brewery for the Beer and Comedy Night. So, anyways, without further ado, I would like to jump into this podcast. But before I do, I might have some new dates coming up, some more podcast guests, and more information about just this podcast and everything that I'm doing. Make sure you follow me on social media, and that is very easy to do. I'm available on Twitter at ManScoutManning or on Instagram at ManScoutManning. If you have a question about the podcast, make sure you email me at jake@sslshow.com, or if you want to become a sponsor of this podcast, that's a good email to use, the jake@sslshow.com. Or if you want to book me for an upcoming wrestling event, make sure you email me at manscoutmanning@yahoo.com. Anyways, without further ado, let's jump into this wonderful conversation with Nicole Odom here on Stranger Southern Land. And Nicole Odom?
Yep.
Did I get okay?
You did. O-D-O-M.
It's the simplest names that always give me the hardest
It
time.
is. You'd be surprised how many people get it wrong.
I don't know if I'd be surprised. I think it'd be the variances that I would be interested in hearing.
Odem, Odom. It's been spelled with an E, an M, or an E, an A, a U, all sorts of things.
Also, yeah, that's why I use a surname, much to the chagrin of my father and the rest of my family. I use Manning when really my last name is Feuerbach, which is actually pronounced incorrectly to begin with.
Sounds like an excellent German beer.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Well, actually, Old Mex got the Feuerbach.
The Feuerbach, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's actually how, the Feuerbach. So that's actually how my name is, but it's not spelled like that whatsoever. So that's why I was explaining to my father. It's like, why are you so proud about this name? We're actually saying it incorrectly because it's Feuerbach is how it's supposed to be said. You really want to say my name is Mr. Feuerbach? Like saying that in America.
It's an awkward introduction for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Much like I always do in this podcast. It's always awkward and stuff like that. Yeah. But I wanted to make sure that I was here on time today.
You were.
Because the first line in the description that Candace, who I've had on here before with Robot Johnson, and she's the one that introduced me to you and your story that we're going to tell today. And she said the first line was that she was in the Navy. So I wanted to make sure that I was here promptly on time. I was just a minute. But I did pull into the parking lot immediately at 10 o'clock. So let you know that that's...
By my watch, it was fine.
Okay.
Although I have to disappoint you a little.
Okay.
In the military, if you're not 10 minutes early, you're late.
Exactly. See, I had the same type of training when I was in college when I was a track athlete. We were always told if you're not a half an hour early, you're late.
We weren't quite that stoic.
Exactly.
Straight.
Yeah. Well, my coach was kind of a Nazi.
Yeah.
I've said it freely before. I'll say it freely again.
Yeah.
And I said it freely to his face a couple of times.
I mean, sometimes you gotta be.
Exactly.
When you're wrangling cats like college kids are.
I guess, yeah. But we're all pretty good. But anyways, Nicole, we're sitting here at Dogtopia, just hanging out, rolling into this conversation and stuff like that. But we've already made mention of something earlier. We were talking off camera and stuff like, you grew up in New Jersey, and and then you moved on to Boston University, but we've already brought up that you were in the Navy, so let's connect those first 2 points to get everybody kind of introduced to your origin story, if you will.
So I grew up in South Jersey. So I'm the suburb of Philly, not the suburb of New York.
Okay, so I can forgive you a little bit more for being from New Jersey.
Yes, I am not a Yankees fan. I'm a Phillies fan.
Okay.
And a Red Sox fan. So that kind of ties the two. I grew up in South Jersey, went to Boston University on a Naval ROTC scholarship, Reserve Officer Training Corps. It's basically like the Naval Academy, but you get to go to a real school and have fun. Yeah,
I'm well aware of the program. I almost did the same exact thing. If I didn't get an athletic scholarship, I would have gone that route because I was in the recruiter's office and everything else. But what was the reason that you wanted to be involved in the Navy? Like, what was the impetus for that?
So you may be familiar with a little movie called Top Gun.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I wanted to be a naval aviator. So that was my goal.
You're part of that statistic where they said that
I am.
that everybody after Top Gun, the naval aviators
Yes,
went up.
it was an outstanding recruiting tool for the Navy. So, yeah, I wanted to be Maverick.
Obviously.
Yeah, hopefully a little nicer and a little less obnoxious.
Well,
but
who didn't want to be Maverick? I ended up
right?
being Goose in real life. So
Well, as you notice, and your listeners on the radio can't see, but I'm wearing glasses, which wasn't something I found out I needed until I got to the physical for naval aviation. So we were about, I think I maybe was a junior in college, and we were getting ready to choose what we wanted to do in the service. And of course, my choice all the way through was naval aviation. And they tested my eyes, and lo and behold, I needed glasses. And so I couldn't be Maverick, I had to be Goose. But ended up not even being that, and we'll get to that story in a little bit. But so that's why I wanted to go into the Navy. I was also the oldest of three, and we come from a middle-class family. We didn't have a ton of money, for me to go to college, and I could have definitely stayed in state, and my parents would have been happy to pay for that. But I wanted to get out of Jersey, and wanted to go to kind of a big city school, and loved Boston from the moment I stepped foot into it, and so decided that's where I wanted to go, and so knew that I had to find a way to pay for it myself, and the Navy did that for me.
Yeah, your story sounds a lot like mine, for sure. Like, well, how big was the town that you were living in and growing up?
So it's a tiny little town called Delanco. We have a 7-Eleven and a stoplight. And that's really it. So I don't know population numbers or anything like that, but we didn't even have our own high school. We had to go to the next town over to go to high
same
school.
exact thing. I grew up in a town of 82 people.
I was not that small.
Yeah. I win again.
You do. I bow down to your small town.
Yes. But same type deal. That's the thing too. Like when you try to explain that to people, like most people, like, oh, I had to go to the next town over to go to high school. I'm like, what? Like, why didn't you go to this one that was in your town? Because it wasn't big enough. Well, it wasn't big enough. What, only a couple thousand? Like, no, it's not the case. They always look at you befuddled and then just shrug your shoulders and walk away from you.
Yes.
Like, that's always the way it works out.
Yes. My town was maybe as big as Noda.
Yeah, I know those towns. Yeah, those little towns that just you drive through. I'm like, oh, that was Teeds Grove.
Right.
Like, I didn't realize that was a thing. Right. Oh, is this place even incorporated? Yeah.
We did have our own town council, I believe, and we had a middle school and an elementary school, but no high school.
Yeah. Yes. So you'd be probably closer to, in my recollection, like a Sebula and stuff like that. Like I remember in Iowa there was a town that was actually smaller than my town. I think it was Sugar Creek. And like in Iowa, the requirement was you had to have 12 people because like you had to have a mayor, a full city council, and then like 4 regular pedestrians or regular residents, regular residents for it to be called the town. And like this town like met the minimum requirement for being called the town and being incorporated.
So we were a little bigger than that.
Yes. So we've just given people scale of where it came from.
Yes.
But yes, I know the exact story of like, because I was an Eagle Scout and like this is armed services. This seems like a good idea. Let's go do this.
Yeah.
So, and of course, you were chasing the dream to be an aviator.
I was. I've always been one of those people who knew exactly what I wanted to do. And so when I was 10, I knew I wanted to be an astronaut. And so my parents sent me to space camp. And then I knew in high school that I wanted to be a naval aviator. So I did ROTC and went to Boston University. And after graduating from BU, I actually did go down to flight school. Was doing really well, was towards the top of my class. But found out, unfortunately, that I get very sick in Navy airplanes. And so I ended up getting medically disqualified from flying, which was a bummer in a big way.
Yeah, well, especially since you've been on this path even the astronaut thing, if you're a naval aviator, you still got that in your back pocket.
It was in my back pocket.
So you're always going towards this goal, and now you're sidetracked.
Yeah, it was a a big disappointment, but you get a lot of those when you're an adult, unfortunately. That was my first big one. But it kind of led me down the path that I'm on today. So I really just kind of started doing whatever the Navy needed me to. And so I got stationed in Japan with Carrier Air Wing 5. So I was still around aviation, which was great because I never... It's a little strange, but I never really wanted to be around boats. Being in the Navy, it was all about the airplanes for me. So I lived in Japan for 3 years with Air Wing 5 and basically did whatever they needed me to do. But one of those things was public affairs, public relations. And while I was stationed there, I deployed to Japan 10 days, or not 10 days, but like 2 months after September 11th. So that kind of gives you a time frame. I graduated in 2000.
Me exactly as well.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
So
our timelines match up.
They do.
We better not touch hands. The world might explode. Just let you know.
If this were a comic book.
Yeah, exactly.
No. So I graduated in May 2000, was commissioned the next day, and was in flight school until about end of 2001. So I think I actually got to Japan in October of 2001. And so we ended up deploying a couple times in response to the engagements that were going on during that time. But the big one that we were deployed for was when Operation Enduring Freedom, which was the response to 9/11 in Afghanistan, became Operation Iraqi Freedom. So we were some of the first planes that launched into Iraq for that fun engagement. And one of the things...
You say that so lovingly, that fun engagement.
Yeah.
What gives you that type of inflection?
Oh, well, just trying to be politically ambivalent, I guess.
Okay, I didn't know if there was actually like beach balls, like, oh, that fun engagement. I remember that was a great time. That was like college all over
Well,
again.
I mean, we did get 2 beer days while we were deployed, but that's because we were at sea for 105 days straight. Yeah. So the Navy has this fun rule that if you're at sea for more than 45 days without a port call, you get 2 beers. And so you have something called a Steel Beach picnic. And on the deck of the aircraft carrier, they set up grills and people play volleyball, they golf, they lift weights.
Okay, so I was right. It was a fun engagement. Okay, all right.
I mean, minus the fact that we were in the middle of the Persian Gulf and launching, weapons of war on another country when we weren't having a Steel Beach picnic. Yes, it was a good time. But one of the things that I did was help to manage the reporters that we had on board. So one of the things that the military as a whole was trying to do was be more transparent in these conflicts. And so they had a pretty unprecedented reporter embed program. And so we had reporters from, I think, 21 different countries on board with us. So we had Japan and Korea and China. We had folks from, I think, Argentina and all over the world. So my job was basically to herd those cats and, make sure.
Because they got their own agendas and everybody wants to be,
Right. I mean, obviously we had our own agenda and they had theirs, and trying to manage the expectations
and they're trying to be like Bob Woodward and get a scoop.
Right.
When like, congratulations, you just broke into like the mess hall. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yes. So that was, that kind of started me down, a path of marketing and public relations. And so when I got out of the Navy, I ended up going into defense contracting and the strategic communications and public relations kind of world of things. And then just happened, just chugging along in DC, and Hurricane Katrina hit. And my ex at the time had family in Louisiana. And so we just packed up our Jeep full of supplies and took a couple days off from work and drove down there just to see what we could do. We weren't affiliated with any specific group or anything like that. But one of the places that we ended up was the LSU Agricultural Center. And that's where they were bringing all the animals that had been displaced. And we had 2 dogs of our own. We weren't unfamiliar with being dog people. But this was really the first time that I got involved in any sort of kind of dog rescue, dog whatever. It was hot, it was humid, it was filthy, and I loved every second of it. People had to stop me and be like, Nicole, have you had anything to drink today? And I'd be like, no, but this dog needs their water, and this dog hasn't got their meds, and this dog just went on a walk 20 minutes ago, but he's going to need another one because he's all pent up. And so it was just kind of my aha moment of, oh, this is what I want to do with my life. So that was kind of my first intentional change of path.
Like I say, because you've been on a very clear path. I mean, like I said, obviously the whole thing of being Maverick didn't work out,
right.
But like you were still on a boat,
right?
You know, you're still a part
right.
of the Navy. You're still doing a thing, and then you moved to defense contracting. You know.
Yeah, and I mean, I certainly just envisioned that being my life. You know, working my way up the ranks of the defense contracting world, and making millions that way. Just kidding. But
for Halliburton or whatever, you'd be
right.
able to sit in the fancy suits and
right.
Work with the Illuminati in the dark shadow of network that runs the entire world.
Yes, running all of the government conspiracies was going to be my life.
Exactly. That was what you wanted. Be the real string puller.
Right.
I don't need to be Maverick. I'm the one telling Maverick where to go secretly.
right. So this was the first time I kind of went, oh, maybe there's something else out there. And it was completely unexpected to me because, I mean, like I said, I had dogs, but I never truly understood what it meant to be a dog person until I...
But what do you mean by dog person?
So have you ever met those people who can't stop talking about their dogs?
Yes.
So that's a dog person.
Okay.
So there's dog parents and there's dog people.
The people that
they're different.
Yeah, and it's like a parent where like you look at them and like, why are they talking to that dog like it's a baby, and why are you talking to that baby like it's a dog?
Right.
Yes.
Right. Those are my people.
Okay.
Those are my people. Yes. And so my dogs at the time went to Dogtopia for daycare because I worked in DC and I worked 10 hours a day and I had a 2-hour commute one way. Mm-hmm. So I needed it. And
DC traffic. I mean, you probably, so I'm guessing it was like a 2-mile trip. So that's why.
It was. Yes.
Yeah.
With no traffic, I could get there in 5 minutes.
Exactly. You could get home about 3 a.m.
Right.
Just in time for traffic to start swelling back up again for 8 a.m.
Right. So, that was 2005. Nothing came of it for a while. I just kind of had in the back of my mind, okay, somehow, some way, I'd like to get involved in the dog community. And so I just kind of chugged along for another few years and come to find out the company that I was working for, we were employee owned. And that doesn't really mean a whole lot when you're just chugging along, but it means a big deal when you get bought out. So we were acquired by a company called CACI, also known as CACI. And that employee stock was something that I could then use to turn into a very nice retirement down the road. Or I used it to turn it into a business. Mm-hmm. So was going through a divorce at the time and knew I didn't want to stay in DC, didn't want to move home to Jersey. So there's a whole big world out there, and I got to just kind of pick and choose where I wanted to be, and Charlotte is what I landed on. Both my brothers went to Queens, and I loved it every time I came down here. Always loved the Carolinas. Didn't want to go back up to the winters of Boston. So in 2007, I became a franchisee, and I moved down to Charlotte to start Dogtopia Charlotte.
Absolutely. Well, let's take a step backwards because we just kind of glazed over.
Sure, I mean, lightning fast.
Exactly. We're connecting the points here.
Yeah.
I want to. You kept me on a linear path, and you're doing a fantastic job of that. But
thank you.
But much like a dog, I saw a squirrel, and I'd like to discuss it. Okay.
Absolutely. Bring it on.
Is the Katrina?
Sure.
You just up and went down there and decided that I want to go down and help. Mm-hmm. Now, had you been down to New Orleans before the Katrina hit?
When I was stationed in Pensacola for flight school,
Pensacola is so fantastic.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
I visited on spring break one year, and it was so beautiful.
It's a lot of fun. I was 21 with a Jeep Wrangler, and I got in a good bit of trouble down in Pensacola.
Oh, yes. I bet. And there's a lot of testosterone floating around because there's a lot of a lot of armed service guys down there, probably less women than there should be down there. So there's a little bit of testosterone, but beautiful location, Pensacola Beach and all that area. Just most beautiful sand ever.
It's gorgeous.
Yes,
it's absolutely
absolutely.
gorgeous. Yeah,
Totally
and
agree.
the naval base actually has its own private beach there. So
Okay.
yeah, it was great.
I bet.
I would fly in the morning, go home, get sick, sleep a little bit, and then go to the beach in the afternoon. It was a hard life.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic.
Yes. But we had gone to New Orleans for one night of Mardi Gras.
Mm-hmm.
We drove the 4 hours over there and hung out on Bourbon Street for a couple hours and then drove back to Pensacola. So that was my only New Orleans experience prior to Katrina.
Yeah, because I went, believe it or not, for a church group to New Orleans, and they took us on Bourbon Street late at night. Why a church group thought that would be a good idea, I do appreciate their attempt in giving us some culture, but we have all kinds of different culture, which everyone was very liberal about it, and everyone was cool about it, and got to do a lot of cool things. But yes, I remember going to that town before the hurricane, and I just went back 2 or 3 years ago. So,
Yeah, we never actually made it into the city
Mm-hmm.
while we were there because at that point FEMA and everything had it closed off, and so you had to be with a specific support or aid group to get into the city. So we spent the first couple nights kind of on our travels. I have family in Mobile, Alabama, so we stopped in Mobile for a night and worked with the Red Cross there for a couple hours because they were hit as well, and down in Dauphin Island and all along the Gulf Coast there. And then we drove over to Slidell, which is right outside of New Orleans. And we volunteered there for, I think, 2 days at a Baptist church there.
Now, how do you volunteer? You just show up like, hey, we're here.
We just showed up with a bunch of supplies in our Jeep. We had, diapers and all sorts of stuff that people needed that friends back in DC had donated. We made an announcement, hey, we're driving down. If you've got anything to donate, pack it in our Jeep. So we were packed so high that we couldn't see out the back window. And we just unloaded it there because we knew at that point that we couldn't actually get into the city. Mm-hmm. And this was kind of as close as we were going to get. So the Baptist church had set up almost like a grocery store in their kind of community center. So, but to keep control of things so that there wasn't, mass chaos, they had their volunteers kind of acting as personal shoppers for people. So the people who were in need would come up to the church. They would give a list of kind of what they needed. And then we would essentially shop for them inside the community center and pull out what they needed. And the Red Cross had set up something in their parking lot with showers and laundry facilities and of course blood drive things as well, and meals and stuff like that. So they could, while we were shopping for them, they could get a shower and a meal. And so we did that for 2 days. And then my ex's family lived up in Baton Rouge, so since we had driven all this way, we wanted to go up and see them. And once we did that, we found out that the dogs and stuff were being brought to the agricultural center right there in Baton Rouge. So we said, okay, well, let's go volunteer there. So we volunteered there for 2 days. And then unfortunately work called us back and said, you have to come home. So
well, what was the thing that compelled, I understand you had family there, but what was the thing that compelled, we need to be there on the ground with our hands and our feet?
I think it was just both that we did have family down there that were so close to being affected by it, and it just didn't feel like enough to just send money or
call them like, are you okay?
I mean, obviously
because it floods.
We did that.
It floods at my farm multiple times, or I see floods and I'm, hey mom, dad, you okay? Okay, good, all right, bye. Yeah,
well, I think it was there's certain points in your life where doing things are easier than others. We were in our mid-20s. We didn't have kids. We only had dogs, and we could get somebody to take care of them. And we had enough time at work where we could take the time. So we talked about it for a couple days and decided that there was nothing really stopping us from doing it. and so we should go and help if we could.
Because it's weird because like I remember Katrina happening, and like it's sometimes it's one of those events that you're so disconnected from it a little bit that like I don't know how I could lock into it. You know what I'm saying? Like I barely remember. I remember seeing it on the news and stuff like that, but I like it didn't affect me in a sense too much. You know what I'm saying? Like you see, unfortunately, there's a lot of bad news in this world, and we get disconnected from a lot of things very quickly. But I remember seeing it, and I don't know if I would have had that, and because I was in my mid-20s as well, and I had a flexible job, and I could have done the same, but I don't know what was the thing that really kicked me in that I should go down there and do something. Because I know multiple people that had no connection whatsoever and decided, I want to go and help.
Yeah, I think it really just, there's no concrete answer I can give you as to why this one over others or why this one in that point of time. It was just one of those things where I think we looked at each other over the dinner table and said, should we go? Yeah, okay, great, let's go. I'm from Jersey. I didn't go up to when Sandy was hit, and so, but I was at a different point in my life with much different responsibilities. So we could, so we did. That was kind of the long and short of it.
Okay. So you're down there in Baton Rouge taking care of dogs and stuff like that. Like, and you just told me that like that was the thing, that was a light bulb, you're taking care of these dogs, but like, you said that all these dogs were coming from like New Orleans and all over the place and they're all shipped there. Like kind of talk about that process and what that was.
Sure. So I'm not exactly sure how they got there. I don't, knowing what I know now about the animal rescue community, I would assume that the ASPCA was involved in some way. But the thing that struck us the most about that is a lot of the dogs that were there, their owners knew that they were there. But they were so displaced themselves. They were living with family. They were living in hotels. They were living in tent cities. They were just living in places that they couldn't have their animals with them. So I remember there was this one guy who would come and like check his dog out every day, and they would just go sit underneath a tree and hang out with each other for hours. And then at the end of the day, he'd check him back in and, go back to wherever it was that he was staying. So, obviously there were plenty that we didn't know who they belonged to or what they needed. But it was a massive undertaking. So I don't know if you've ever been in an agricultural center, but it's where like they have 4-H shows and stuff like that. So think of rodeo kind of facility,
like gates where you would show cattle and stuff like sectioned off little pens and stuff like that.
Exactly. So we had Akitas, which are big dogs. Our male Akita was like 110 pounds. So we told them that we had experience with big dogs, and so that's where they put us. And the big dogs were in essentially the livestock pens. So think a big cattle stall or a horse stall, and that's where they were bringing the animals. And if they knew that they were sibling pairs, they went together. But most of them were just in these cattle runs all by themselves. And what we did was there was some Maine volunteers that were part of whatever organization was running the facility. And again, I'm just going to assume that it was the ASPCA because I don't know that I ever found that out. But they kind of kept track of everything that each dog needed and where each dog was. And what we would do is whatever they told us to do. So we would clean out stalls. We would help them dispense food. We would help them dispense meds. We would take the dogs and exercise them, just walk them around the center, walk them around the grounds. And we would just get to as many dogs as we can in that day. And unfortunately, we were only able to work 2 days. I could have worked there all week easily and then some, but our clients were calling us back, so we had to come back.
But while you were there, like, you said you didn't really know who was running it. Like,
yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah, but like seemed like you were talking about like the dogs have to do this. So there was a certain like you have to do this and this and this. Like people talk a lot about like the chaos and the unorganizedness of this but it seems like there was a little bit of structure in like what you had to do that day.
Yeah, it was incredibly well organized where we were, and I don't, we got there several days after. Looking at it, we were probably there a week after the hurricane actually hit New Orleans. So we went down, I think it was Labor Day weekend. So we kind of took an extra long Labor Day weekend. And, it took us a day to drive there to Mobile. Then it took us a day to drive over to Slidell. So we had already been on the road for 4 or 5 days but by the time we got to the agricultural center. And I say that because in all that time, it gave them to get organized and get routines down and things like that. So it's not like we were walking into that on day one in complete chaos when they're still trying
they've already developed something that's kind of worked.
Their routine, exactly. And we just kind of walked into we walked up to the ag center and found somebody who looked like they knew what they were doing and said, "We're here to volunteer. Where do we go?" And they just kind of pointed us in the direction of somebody who was, relatively in charge of something, and they pointed us toward the Big Dog area, and then we started working for them.
So it's a little bit more like the early part of Apocalypse Now, as opposed to the later part of Apocalypse Now, where everything's out of control and who's in charge and nobody has a clue.
Yes,
so
Kurtz was still in control.
Exactly, it was much further down at the front of the river than in the back half of the river. Very much so.
Yes,
but you're coming back. You've seen in Mobile and Baton Rouge, and you've dealt with people in distress, dogs in distress. Emotionally, what's the thing that probably still sticks with you the most when you think about that time?
This is going to sound awful, but my joy is what sticks out to me the most. How fulfilled I felt doing those things is what I remember the most. I don't remember a lot of the people. So this was actually still back in the days of MySpace.
I'm well aware.
So I was each night I tried to do a MySpace journal on what we had done, and it was the early days of blogging, I guess you could call it. Who we had talked to, what we had done, and how we felt each day about it. And so the way home was kind of just, you get 14 hours in a car, you got a lot to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say stuff. like if there's gonna be a lot going on.
So I spent a lot of time rereading what I had written each night, and just putting together kind of an overarching thought of what this trip meant to us. And the big thing that I found that it meant to me was that I needed to find a way to work with dogs somehow. And I didn't know what that meant for me. My ex and I talked about it at the time, and we didn't really know, how we could make that a part of our lives. It was really before...
Especially as a defense contractor.
Right.
Unless we're going to put laser beams on dogs and deploy them.
We
I don't
had
know how this is going to work.
Keep paying the bills, and, we had a mortgage and car payments and things like that we had to keep worrying about. So, I knew dog rescue wasn't exactly the path. Ultimately I'm a capitalist and I'd like to support myself and my family. And so it was also kind of before dog rescue got big as a movement. People, when you wanted a dog, your first thought wasn't always the shelter. It was to ask somebody, well, do you know a breeder, or to look in the newspaper even. I mean, that's how we found one of our Akita, our very first Akita. That's how we got him. We found him in the Washington Post. And so, I didn't even know how to go about getting involved in dog rescue at the time. And so, honestly, after we got home, nothing really happened. I was pretty much just heads down, back at work, catching up with everything. And it's just one of those things that kind of lives in the back of your brain for a while, and you can't really do anything about until you can. And so I couldn't do anything about it until I had financial resources to do something about it. And that's where the acquisition came into play, and being an employee-owned company came into play. And it took me all of a day. Once I found out how much I was getting in employee stock, it took me less than a day to sign up on the Dogtopia website with, requesting information on how to be a franchisee.
Okay, and then that's what brought you here to Charlotte, North Carolina.
It is.
So when you moved here, you obviously wanted to open up Dogtopia, do your thing and stuff like that, but
it was kind of a roundabout thing there too. So
tell me more about this.
Well,
I'm big on roundabouts.
Because of the way I was financing, so we were employee owned through something called an ESOP, an employee stock ownership plan. But to get the money that you are owed from an ESOP, the IRS has to review the plan to make sure that, it's appropriate, that it's fair, that, everybody's being treated the way that they're supposed to. That took them 24 months to do.
Of course it did.
Yes. In true IRS fashion.
Of course it did.
Months. So I knew exactly how much I was getting.
I'm surprised you didn't have to pay an expedition fee to get it done in 24 months.
Right. We actually had to get members of Congress involved and different. Yeah, it was. Anyway, it was a hot mess.
Okay, well that explains the 24 months then.
Yes. So I signed my franchise agreement in October of 2007, and I moved to Charlotte in December of 2007. So you may remember what was going on in 2007 when things started to spiral downward economically. And
I was just saying, there were a lot of things going on. Tell me which one specifically.
Well, so I came down here. I knew that I was owed X amount of money from the IRS, but I didn't have any idea when X amount of money was coming. So it meant that I couldn't do things like sign a lease on a building or start construction or do anything that you need to do to start a business. So I actually ended up having to get a job down here. So I worked as the original title was web editor for Mecklenburg County Public Information Systems Services, and kind of ended up really kind of exploring social media, and started their Twitter handle and their Facebook page and started managing that for them, until my stock money came through and I was actually able to open the business. So while I signed my agreement in 2007, we didn't actually open our doors here at Dogtopia Charlotte until March of 2010.
Oh.
Yes. So it was a little bit of a delay.
Gosh. Well, what was going through your head at that time? Take me through that, because you've had a very linear path through everything.
Yeah.
And not a whole lot of sidetracks, not anything too far off. This is the first time you've really jumped off a path. And now you're dealing with a massive hurdle. Now, granted, you probably clear over this hurdle, but you don't know. It's up to men in suits in front of paperwork that can go, nah, don't think so.
Yeah, so there was, we'll call 2008 a low point in my life. I was recently divorced. I had moved to a new city. The only people I knew were my younger brothers, one of whom is 10 years younger than me, and I adore him, but 10 years is a big difference when you're, 19 and 29.
Oh, absolutely. I work with a lot of kids that are 5-6 younger than me, and I feel like I'm talking a different language.
Yeah, I mean, not in terms of that, but socially.
Absolutely. They've got different goals in their life. You're trying to build a business and get that off the ground.
Right.
They've got far less loftier goals in front of them.
Our ideas of a fun Friday night are a little different.
Absolutely.
And so that was challenging, trying to find people who I could even just hang out with on a Friday night doing what I wanted to do, was a bit of a challenge. And I didn't know when the money was coming. So I had to, I was living in a new city, recently divorced, had to start a new job, wasn't doing what I wanted to be doing. So
Yeah, it's just a job. It's not a career.
yes, and I knew that, and I was very upfront with them about it. I told them that it would probably only be about a year of my time, and that's about what it worked out to be. I worked with them until February of 2009, or I'm sorry, February of 2010. So it was a little over a year, I guess. But so it was not a fun year, 2008. Luckily, things started, taking a turn. Our ESOP plan coordinator was really great from the old company. He would send out communications. He would let us know, where things were on the track. And once the plan got approved, things moved very quickly for me. So I think the money got released in July. July of 2009, I had signed a lease by September. And we were in construction by November. So things kind of really picked up once we got the go-ahead. And in that time, I met my now husband, and, things socially started to get much better, too. So 2009 really started to take off for us.
That's usually sometimes the thing that you need sometimes is you got that person that kind of understands you're on your wavelength and stuff like that. That's pretty important to sometimes your sanity, especially if your career is not going as well as you.
Yes, he certainly keeps me sane.
I totally agree. I've thanked my girlfriend many times for not allowing me to kill people. So it's like you don't realize how many lives you've actually saved today. Like, you actually have saved people's lives. Congratulations.
Yeah.
With doing merely nothing.
Right. Just by being you.
Just by making sure I started at 4, not at 8 today. So thank you.
Right. Right. Well, and he's part of Robot Johnson, and so I started to get involved in that social circle, and met some of my very good friends, Candace being one.
Yeah, Candace, fantastic.
She's kind of a rock in our lives. She actually officiated our wedding.
Oh, fantastic!
So yes.
She's fantastic. She's just one of those people that help line up all these interviews, especially.
She's good people.
She's
the
for
best
sure.
kind
I
of
just
people.
saw her last night as well.
Excellent.
Just was out at a comedy show, just hanging out, meeting people.
You weren't the guy that was talking in the comedy show, were you?
No, I would not.
Okay, good.
Okay. No, I was not.
Because we would have to stop the podcast just right now.
Just right now.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I do stand up as well, so I know how
Good.
disruptive that is. Which is the complete opposite of pro wrestling, where you want people to talk as loud as possible.
Right.
Actually, in fact, yell at you directly.
Please do that.
Please heckle me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Which is the complete opposite. But so now you've opened your doors.
So we opened our doors in 2010, which is still not a great time economically.
Oh, I mean,
so the best thing to do in an economic downturn is start a new business.
obviously.
Who doesn't think that's a good idea?
Yeah, exactly.
But I didn't even really think of that. It was just, oh my God, I finally have this. Let's press forward and do it. So,
well, tell me how good it felt on day one to turn that key in your door and know that you were opening your doors for business day one after going through everything you went through. Tell me how good that felt.
It felt amazing. It absolutely felt amazing. There's really nothing that you can compare it to. Because you've worked so hard to get there. It's terrifying because it's not something that you've ever done before. But it's exhilarating because it's not something you've ever done before. Mm-hmm. So it's been a long, strange trip for sure. But I would do it all over again in a heartbeat.
Absolutely. So now that you've had your doors open for probably
just over 6 years.
Just over 6 years. Mm-hmm. Tell me how this business is growing. Tell me how it's doing.
Sure.
Let's give a rundown of this.
Sure. So, we've grown pretty steadily every year in terms of revenue and, just in terms of people and dogs. I mean, I remember the first couple days, I think it was a good 2 weeks before we had our first boarding customer. And now I can't remember the last time we had, less than 5 dogs stay a night. Mm-hmm. So, what I love too is all the different kinds of dogs, all the different personalities of dogs that I get to see, and the people. I mean, I have some really great employees, and it sounds so cliched and silly, but I really love making an impact on the local community by providing jobs. And, we employ as many as 15 people during the busy summer season. So that's no small impact on our, town's economics, I hope.
Oh, absolutely. You can make your own little dent in that. Like my company's about the same size as well, and employ roughly about the same amount of people. So it's like, these are the people that you're responsible for. But like I've discussed with my boss, he feels a certain amount of responsibility to tell your employees. Do you feel that pressure?
Oh God, yes. So I've always been a person who could sleep anywhere. When I was in the Navy, I slept underneath the number 2 catapult and could hit snooze 17 times with no problem.
Number 2 catapult, as in like the thing.
As in the thing that launches the yes.
Yes.
I've fallen asleep at a Fuel concert. I could sleep anywhere. Since I've started this business, I have developed insomnia, which is a delightful experience. So it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of worry. It's a lot of frustration. It's a lot of irritation in a lot of ways. But it's a lot of satisfaction too, because you, for the most part, control your own destiny. I always joke that if I didn't do this, I don't know what the hell I'd do, because I would be a terrible employee now. I don't know how I could go back and work for somebody else after owning my own business.
So you get to do what you want.
Well,
within reason.
I mean, you have to do all the terrible things that nobody else wants to do, too.
Obviously.
So, I mean, I'm the plumber, I'm the HR specialist, I'm the payroll specialist, I'm the operations manager, I'm the customer service manager, I'm the marketing manager. Sometimes I'm the dog wrangler. Sometimes I'm out there mowing the lawn and trimming the hedges.
Are you a person that leads by example, or what type of leader are you?
Oh, that's a very deep question. I try to be. It's difficult for me now. I have 15-month-old twin girls. So I would say prior to babies, yes, I'm a lead by example kind of person. So, if somebody didn't show up for work, or if somebody got sick, I would come and pick up a playroom shift if I had to, or I would come and work the front desk so somebody else could work a playroom shift. When I first opened the business, I was here opening and I stayed until closing, which is a very, very long day. We get the dogs up at 6 a.m. and we put them to sleep at 9 o'clock at night. So it's a long day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Since the babies are born, I think I'm probably less of that. I am more a director of operations than I am, an operations specialist, we'll call it. But I try and still set good examples for my employees. So
you've gotten better at delegating responsibility.
Absolutely. I have a pretty fantastic assistant store manager right now. And she keeps the lights on in the building most days.
Okay, that's good. So how's life with twins? My sister just had twins as well. Like, she's handling it fairly well. Have you been handling? Yeah, but my sister's a teacher, and she has help. And of course, my mom has basically partly moved down to Florida just to spend time with the kids. How are you running a business with twins?
So our live parallels continue, it seems. So my mom has basically moved down here to help me. So she has a house down here, and my dad, unfortunately, is still working. So he's close to retirement, though, and we're hoping, sometime within the next year he'll be able to come down here and join her. But she's been a ginormous help. She was watching them 2 days a week for me. My mother-in-law watches them 1 day a week for me, and then they do daycare 2 days a week as well. So it's a big balancing act for sure. There are a lot of days when I'm not sure if I'm doing any of it well, motherhood or business ownership. And then there are other days when I feel like I'm rocking it. So it really kind of depends on the day.
All depends on how the puzzle pieces fit together.
Exactly.
That's one of those things. When you have a good day, I'm like, oh, this didn't really go that way. But then there's days where, like, all of a sudden this got done at a perfect time. They're going down at a certain time. Like, all the pieces start to... When you're very busy and you have a lot of things going, when the pieces start fitting together, that's when you feel like you're really rocking it. And you're like, oh, it's 5 o'clock. I've done all this. It's everything. I haven't run into any roadblocks yet.
Right. I mean, I have a pretty amazing husband as well who has no problem making dinner pretty much every night of the week. And, you know, when the girls were first born, he was actually working from home, and we adjusted our time so that, you know, one of us essentially would stay up until 4 a.m, and then the other one would go to bed and wake up. And so we managed to make sure that each of us got at least 5 hours of sleep a night, which is no small feat with twins. And so I wouldn't have survived the first 4 months of their life if not for Graham. I mean, he's an incredible dad and just a rock star husband. And so it really takes a well-oiled team to keep them running, and luckily I think we have that.
Absolutely. Well, we're getting close towards the back half of this. We've gotten further down the river. We've finally gotten to Colonel Kurtz now, this interview.
Yes.
But
Graham, you're not Colonel Kurtz, I promise.
Yeah, we didn't do a linear thing. We just brought it up because I have a bald head. You know what I'm saying? I might throw some stuff at Dennis Hopper too. It's all good. But does
that mean I'm Martin Sheen in this analogy?
Yeah, you might be. So you come out of the water real slow.
Wonderful,
so
I promise.
I appreciate you getting all these references. I don't know if everybody listening, especially for our younger listeners, they may not know.
Probably not. Apocalypse now.
Exactly. We're running on parallel wavelengths right now, so we're going to interact that way. But what I always ask, and why I've started this podcast, is I talk to people of varying degrees of success. I've talked to the mayor. I've talked to guys that work for Richard Childress Institute of Pediatric Trauma. I've talked with comedians, writers, improv people, a wide variety of people. But basically, I want to be locked in a room with people of varying degrees of success and ask them, what does success mean to you? How do you define it? Do you think it's obtainable? Do you have a clear definition of what it is? When I say the word success, what pops in your head?
So success for me is being able to balance running a business with being a mom and a good wife, and not having to worry about how we're going to pay the bills. So, I don't need to live in a Myers Park McMansion. I don't need to be driving a Bentley. I just need to know that all my bills are on auto pay and the bank isn't going to call me and say that there's been an overdraft.
Just having auto pay, I'm impressed with you. Are you sure you don't have the fancy car and live in Myers Park? Auto pay.
Have you seen my beat-up Explorer?
Get out of here. Auto pay, fancy pants.
Right. I mean, it's the little things like that. We just being able to go on vacation and not have to worry about, okay, can we really afford a week at the beach? Or, that is success for us. And balancing work and family for me is paramount. I don't want to be a stay-at-home mom. I don't think that would be fulfilling for me. I love my children with every core of my being, but I need something outside of them to give my life purpose. But at the same time, I don't want to miss everything. And this is kind of the quintessential issue that every parent, I think, has to deal with is, you have to find purpose for yourself and you have to support your family, but then you also want to be there for the important moments. And it's a very delicate balance, and we don't get it right all the time, but I think we get it right more than we get it wrong. And so that's been really important for me, especially since the kids are so young. And I mean, they can change so much just in a day right now. It's unbelievable.
Absolutely. How do you deal with those roadblocks, those bumps on the roads? Obviously, you've had a very big roadblock and bumps on the road, but how do you deal with them now, though, that you're on this train and you're rolling through?
It really depends on what the roadblock is. My very first stop with any issue that I have is my husband. And talking it over with him and getting his advice or his recommendations or just his sympathetic ear sometimes solves a problem. I'm one of those people who tend to figure things out as they talk about them.
So you just need somebody to listen.
Sometimes, and a lot of times.
That's one thing that I've learned now is that sometimes sometimes mostly as the male partner in a relationship is that you need.
Sometimes we don't need you to say anything.
We don't need to say anything. You just have to look like you're
just
listening.
Nod and smile.
And like, yeah, you're right. And then
you
figure it out. Like sometimes you don't need to have the answer. You don't need to. They're not asking you to fix anything.
Right.
Which is fine. I don't feel like fixing anything right now anyway.
Yeah.
So
that was actually a big challenge that Grim and I had as we first started our relationship because he's very much of the mind that he should fix problems. He's a problem solver. It's what he does every day in his job, and so every time I would come to him with a problem, he would try and fix it. Bless his heart. And that wasn't always what I needed. There was a lot of times when I just needed him to listen, and I could figure it out as I was talking. And so he's learned how to do that, and to really be that earpiece that I need. And if he isn't the right one, then luckily I have people like Candace, my assistant manager, Holly, my mom, lots of friends that I can talk to and listen to. And the other great thing is one of the reasons that I chose to be a franchisee rather than just throwing out a shingle and opening my own facility was because there's also a business support behind that. So, if it's a business related problem, I can go to another franchisee. I can go to my support office. And so I really do have a village that I can rely on to help me get through roadblocks and solve problems.
That's good because now you have people you can talk with directly and stuff like that, and it's not like you're running a McDonald's. You know what I'm saying? They're like,
No.
The support seems a little spread a little thin. No, you've got a nice community that you can work with.
Absolutely,
different groups,
I do.
So that's awesome and great. Well. Now let's give everybody the opportunity to let them know if they have a dog, how they can bring them to you, and all the services that you provide here at Dogtopia.
Yeah. So we are a full-service dog daycare, boarding, and grooming facility here in Charlotte. We're located at 616 Springbrook Road. It's off of Old Pineville Road between Woodlawn and Tyvola.
And very, very easy access off 77 as well. It was very easy to get here, and I live over by the old Coliseum. So
oh, wow, yeah.
I got here in no time whatsoever. So really just about any place in the city is very close to this location.
Yeah, we're only about 10 minutes from the airport, so if you're traveling, it's really easy access to get, drop off your dog and then get to your plane. If you work in Uptown, we're pretty close. But there are lots of employers around us too that Belk, Coca-Cola, Wells Fargo, those are all companies that we see a good bit of our customers come from. But the best candidates for us are well socialized dogs. We are all open play, so everybody goes through a meet and greet process where we introduce them to a group of the dogs that we have here that day. We're just testing their temperament, making sure that they're comfortable in our environment and seeing which play group would suit them best. And then of course we do have to look at their vaccines. They have to be current on rabies, distemper, and bordetella. And they have to be spayed or neutered if they're older than 7 months. And then, of course, we give parents a tour of the facilities so that they can see where their dog's going to be playing and staying. But the best way to find out more information about us is just to go to our website. It's dogtopia.com, DOGTOPIA.com. Or give us a call. It's 704-525-4440.
All right. Well, Nicole, is there anything else that I've neglected, glazed over, or you want anybody to know?
I don't know. I feel like we've just written my biography here. It's been pretty interesting.
Exactly. It's just a little time capsule that you can keep now.
Yeah, it's been fun.
And then when the twins want to know more about mom, they can just listen to this.
That's true. That's true.
But anyways, Nicole, thank you for taking time out of your day.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's been mine.
Wonderful.